I started a series a while ago talking about the things I have uncovered about myself as I've gone through years of therapy and trying to dissect what happened in my life as an adult, in my marriage. And one of the big things I have uncovered is that I avoided conflict and held in a lot of resentment that was unexpressed. And so this video is going to just go through what childhood trauma does in terms of conflict avoidance and our tendency to feel resentment. We're not going to go into how to communicate in this video, specifically like healthy communication styles, because first of all, I think you can find that anywhere. But we are going to talk about the role that these things play and what you can do to work on this piece of resentment that lives inside your heart. That oftentimes you don't even know you're in. I want to say that I found some interesting conversations occurring around resentment, that finding hidden resentment is a key to understanding what we're longing for, and it's also often a placeholder for our own childhood attachment wounds. And I found this quote. I was watching a video by Dr. Bryant, and I believe it was from her video or a web page, and it said, "Resentful partners resent their partners for things done to them in previous relationships going back to childhood." So there can be resentment, obviously, for what the partner is doing, but oftentimes because of the partner choice being unconscious and us trying to heal, we already had these resentments, right? And we were trying to pick someone that was going to help us release those and not have them. But when we're unaware, we often repeat those cycles. And that the concept of resentment is about an awareness of mistreatment. And that is really important. It's not just you being a bitter, angry person. Now, whether or not that resentment is grounded in the other person's behavior or not, and or childhood, that can all vary, like I'm saying. But that there needs to be an acknowledgement of our resentment, because oftentimes it is a direct link to mistreatment. But because we often, if we have more conflict avoidant tendencies, we don't know how to put language to that. We just know we feel it. We feel wronged. We feel resented or not heard or not seen. And oftentimes, like I'm saying, that links back to childhood. So let's talk about childhood first. First of all, the way you approach resentment and conflict avoidance, and let's look at it this way. As I've said, for many of us, anger was dangerous in our homes. It was dangerous because the parent gave us the silent treatment. It was dangerous because they yelled and screamed and raged. There weren't really any healthy models of the feelings around frustration, anger. It was like yelling, screaming, icing someone out, whatever it was. And especially in more, really intense homes where anger is like that, is really grounded and connected to fear. And a lot of what I talk about, disorganized attachment, right? Fear is a big part of it. When the source of safety is also the source of fear in the same person. The person that's supposed to take care of you is the person you have to stay hypervigilant and monitor because you're afraid of them or their mood or mind or temper. It's a problem. And so conflict avoidance shows up in this approach avoid. And the approach avoid is very common in disorganized attachment because we're trying to get our needs met and approach when the parent is safe, but also avoid when they're, in a traumatized state, unsafe, whatever. So we have this push-pull in ourselves, but no real safe place to deal with our own feelings around our own anger, resentment, hurt, whatever. So that kind of lays the groundwork. The next thing is, like I said, that conflict, or I would even argue self-advocacy, feels unsafe because speaking your needs wasn't allowed, wasn't asked, wasn't cared for in the home, right? You were talking back. You were being disrespectful. You were supposed to just do what you were told. And so you watched a lot of conflict escalate to anger and rage and yelling. And so in your mind, self-advocacy, conflict, communication, speaking your mind equals danger, equals anger. So no, thank you. I'll avoid it. And you may also have chosen a partner who can't tolerate any kind of discourse. And so it's also true. You didn't just pick a calm partner. You picked a partner who, much like your parents or caregivers, can't tolerate anything. It feels like you're challenging them, disrespecting them, pushing them back. So once pushing back against them, I should say. And so once again, you avoid it, but you feel the root of the mistreatment that manifests in resentment. Number 3, in childhood trauma, we are really impacted, especially depending upon like the environment, but really in every form. It affects our self-confidence, our belief in ourselves, our sense of entitlement to have disagreement, to mark our territory and say, this hurt me, this is not okay, this is mistreatment. So we don't feel the confidence to even express it or entitled to it. Our dogs are barking in the neighborhood. The next one is that there's been a history of us being overpowered or shut down, like I was saying. So we were not allowed to even speak our minds. Therefore, we avoid, we resent. The next one is number 5, that deep inside, because of these roots, especially if it was an unsafe situation at home, emotionally or otherwise, we believe that everything is somehow our fault anyway. And so when we feel resentment, we can't fully let ourselves say, well, this belongs to you. It always comes back to somehow, yeah, but if we just hadn't done this or hadn't said that, or I just should let that go. I don't need this or need that for my partner. But once again, we're not voicing it, we're avoiding conflict, and we are resenting them. Number 6, oftentimes we end up choosing, especially if you had really unsafe childhoods, you can have a tendency to choose narcissistic partners, emotionally immature partners. And so anger is going to be rejected. It's going to be dangerous. Any attempt to communicate is going to be unsuccessful, like I said. So you really are reenacting the trauma there. A lot of times, I think, especially in heterosexual relationships, women will say, I asked for this thing a million times. And then when I left, the partner said, what do you mean? I didn't know you were leaving. I mean, it's sort of a trope and a sort of a thing, but like it seems to be very true, especially in heterosexual relationships, that women will say, I did communicate my resentments. I did try to tell you, but you weren't listening. And so at some point they stop sharing, but the resentment root grows and grows. And this can happen obviously for anyone. It doesn't have to be in heterosexual relationships at all. But I've just found that because women are expected and wired to communicate so much more, that it seems to be more of a common thread. But like I said, once again, you've just, become so resentful that one day you wake up and you're done. And there is no repair to be made or possible. Number 8 is that we shame ourselves or tell ourselves that resentment in and of itself is bad. You're not allowed to have it, don't feel it, so numb it, avoid it, suppress it, whatever it takes, but don't feel it. And once again, though, we're dealing with a big root that feels like we've been mistreated. And eventually there will be an outcome, whether it's a blow up, a fight, a distancing, a permanent distancing. There's no way to have that resentment go on and on and on and have it not be addressed. So if you feel like this is you and you want to explore this more, what can you do? Number 1, try to follow the feelings, right? So what does resentment feel like? It feels like wound, like shame, like anger, like sadness, like hurt. I mean, fill in the blank for you. But when you think about what makes you mad about your partner, what are the things you feel like you keep asking for? What is the theme of disappointment? Often that disappointment theme leads to resentment, and that leads to whatever's been happening. So follow the feelings. The next question is to look at, where is this familiar? If I felt really unseen in my marriage, not me, but I did, but let's say did I feel also unseen in childhood? When, how, by whom? Try to make those connections. What is familiar now and what is familiar in previous, maybe other relationships, parenting or otherwise. The next thing is, what am I not expressing, right? So now we're getting at, what is the mistreatment that is making me resentful that I am not saying? And of course, I would journal about this. I would write about it. I would talk and get support about it. and then look at how to express that ideally and do communication patterns and strategies, which I'm not going into today, but with your partner. How to say, I feel this, I that, to do I statements, that kind of classic stuff. And then to look at, why am I not expressing this thing? Am I afraid? Is there a fear of rejection? Is there a lack of safety? Is it dangerous? Because if you're, let's say, with a dangerous partner, none of this is going to work because it's not safe to express it. But maybe you have to develop a safety plan to end the relationship. A safety plan is really important. We're not going to go into that today either. But if you think you're in an unsafe relationship physically or emotionally in a way that's dangerous, please Google safety plan. So the root of this whole thing is that our resentment tells a story, oftentimes that goes years and years beyond what we're living in now. And if you're not really clear, you can be acting out old resentment. Maybe your partner really isn't doing a lot of these things, but you're putting them on the partner because you have all these unmet and unaddressed mistreatments and wounds and hurts, and you need to work on that. Maybe it isn't fair. Maybe you are projecting some things that just don't belong to your partner. Maybe they do, and you are in a reenactment. But I think it's important to look at, because when I think about, I did communicate. I did not throw a fit and rage and yell and scream, because in my childhood, getting really angry was unsafe in a marriage. And so up until really towards the end, I would have conversations, I would ask her what I wanted, and it would never change. And in addition, with reenacting a lot of the same patterns, I just lived with that and lived with that and lived with that. And I guess you could make an argument that if I had really let myself feel the resentment and do the work, I may have left much earlier. I may have done some things differently, right? I don't believe it was possible, no matter what I did at this stage of my life, to have changed the outcome of that relationship. But I do believe that, my tendency to not set enough boundaries with my kids, for example, around chores, and then feel resentful. It's okay, yes, that belongs to me. I need to communicate that and have conversations and expectations. But this old root of resentment, of always feeling like everything is my fault, but not even that I have to that I'm alone in the world. I have to fix everything. I have to clean all the dishes and sweep the yard. And it's just everything, make the money. There's a root of that is just a reality. I'm the parent or whatever. But oftentimes, if you're not careful, your child, let's say, not doing their chores, you could dump your history of feeling like you're alone in the world on them. And that's how often a lot of those blows happen, I think, with our kids, is that we're not able to be in the present and address what's happening with them. It's they're a placeholder for all of the hurts and wounds and triggers. And if you're really not mindful, that's why I think generational trauma can go on for so long, is that you think it's about them, and more often than not, because you're the adult, it is about your own childhood, your own wounds, and your own stories that have not been healed or processed or repaired. So anyway, hope that was helpful. Please feel free to leave your comments down below. Please take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon.